There's a lot going on.
We're seeing the Trump administration move very quickly. The frustration is definitely there.
How do you sift the news from the noise?
The main trend and theme that I've been seeing, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's always uncertainty in the industry, but I think right now it's very present. It's very heightened.
This is a new FDA, no doubt about it.
We've been writing a lot about the vaccine industry, which I wasn't really writing about before. There's so many knowns and unknowns.
There's so much to unpack and yet also so little. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Making Medicine podcast, where science, policy, and innovation meet. As always, I'm your host, John Stanford. As we continue the rollout of the new and improved Making Medicine podcast, we'll be introducing our listeners to new segments of the show. Today, we have Nyah Phengsitthy from Bloomberg Law with us for a new segment called Press Pass, where we will feature different voices in the media space who cover the issues affecting those of us in the Incubate network. And now, on to the show. Well, thanks, Nyah, for joining the Press Pass, where it's critically important. You're central to so much of this conversation in the media. You've done such a wonderful job covering where policy and the drug industry and making medicine all meet. So it's natural that we would want to pick your brain a little bit because there's a lot going on. And maybe that's the best place to jump off. What do you think are the biggest couple of headlines or trends that you're watching in the Trump administration?
Right. Well, thank you, John, for having me. It's great to always talk about everything that's happening in the pharmaceutical industry, especially as we're seeing the Trump administration move very quickly with some drug pricing policies. And there's a lot of action going on in Congress, especially with the One Big Beautiful Bill recently passing. And we're also seeing some of the programs like the Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Program unravel under the Trump administration. I would say some of the biggest headlines that I have been writing about or have been digging deep into really all have to do with how the industry has been reacting to some of the Trump administration's policies or introduction of policies, let's say. So that is every time he makes news on tariffs that are coming or most favored nation and his move to revive that policy. We've been writing a lot about the vaccine industry, which I wasn't really writing about before. And it's been interesting to see how the pharmaceutical industry has been reacting to some of RFK Jr.'s actions with vaccines. But I would say the main trend and theme that I've been seeing as I am writing these stories and reactions to how industry is, responding to President Donald Trump is there's a lot of uncertainty. And don't get me wrong, there's always uncertainty in the industry, but I think right now it's very present, it's very heightened, because with this administration, we have little details on how these major things are going to affect the industry. So I think a lot of folks are on edge. But that's not to say that the industry is also appears to be optimistic to work with the administration. They seem to be clear about their concerns and uncertainty, but they're also we look forward to working with the Trump administration more.
I think you hit on so much there. That uncertainty is why we, on a regular basis, turn to your work. I mean, love reading the pieces you do. They're always so well-sourced and insightful. How do you sift the news from the noise, especially with President Trump? We can see something announced and then it goes nowhere. Or is it really going somewhere secretly behind the scenes? How are you picking what to write about and what's real and what's maybe just an announcement that actually we're not seeing go anywhere?
It's a good question. It's just a matter of keeping up with the industry, but I'm also watching very closely how they are responding to some of Trump's actions. A couple weeks ago, I just put out a story on pharma and bio's lobbying efforts under the Trump administration. And there's been instances where they've quickly responded to some of the actions, for example, MFN, the vaccines. And then there's also been instances where they've kind of just been quiet. I think they were a little quiet on the vaccine stuff because RFK Jr. was moving so fast and they were picking and choosing what they should publicly share their concerns about. So I would say that would be my news judgment, is what is industry quickly responding to, or what are they quiet about? Because if they're quiet about it, maybe they're kind of like holding back. And that's where I'm making, my news judgment. I'm also seeing, what exactly is the Trump administration focusing on most, like with I also cover FDA, and there's a lot in the drug space there, but we see that RFK Jr. is doing a lot with food. So I've also had to like shift my, my beat to more of like the food space as well.
Yeah, you have to keep up with the policymakers, and that's a dynamic field these days. You talked a little bit about the FDA, and I want to stay there for a second. This is a new FDA, no doubt about it. And we also saw recently the beginning of the conversations about the reauthorization of the FDA, some stakeholder meetings. The early stage ecosystem definitely has thoughts about how the FDA can best serve the American people. But I suppose both in the macro and the micro, where do you see the FDA going? What do you see Congress doing, if anything, to put their stamp on the agency? Or is it really, under its new leadership, going somewhere that you hadn't anticipated?
I think it's all of it. Like I see, I would say what I noticed quickly about this FDA particularly is one thing that they continue to say over and over again in, all their press releases, or when Dr. Makary, the FDA commissioner, comes out and makes an announcement, it's that they want to work with industry. They want to hear their problems and their concerns. But I think industry is just kind of like, feeling uneasy because they're moving so fast, with these new policies, introducing changes through medical journals, or, introducing big things on X. So I think they're a little worried about that. But FDA continues to do that. But I will say, going back to my main point, is that they want to work with industry is what it looks like. And we see Makary, who recently did the CEO listening tour with the pharmaceutical industry, which is a big deal. And he seems to be meeting with leaders on how to make FDA more efficient. And I think it also comes down to like what efficient means and who gets to stay at FDA.
Yeah, another sort of magic word that I hope folks take away listening to this is efficiency and that access. I think you're right that the door has been open for conversations. Industry may not always love what they're hearing in those conversations, but the conversations are there. And then I think you said something earlier that I wanted to come back to of the little details are missing. In your conversation with stakeholders, industry, VCs, that how challenging is it for them to react to these policies that may be nothing more than a few sentences long at best, maybe even just a post on X proposing something that would really shift their value chain? How is that frustration something you hear a lot?
Yeah, the frustration is definitely there. And it was even there for me when I was writing my story about, their reactions, because when I spoke with the industry, they're like, well, we don't really have a reaction because there's not much to react to. So I think the best that they, what they are doing best right now is, sitting back and trying to prepare as much as they can. I talked to a couple stakeholders who are like, there's so many knowns and unknowns. I think right now they like labeled the Medicare drug price negotiation as like a known unknown. Like they kind of are grasping it. They know how to deal with it. It looks like the Trump administration is moving, ahead with it fully. But then there's also like the unknown with MFN tariffs, and just the other executive order that, seeks to lower drug prices that Trump signed earlier this year.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack and yet also so little. It's a paradox. Very grateful for the time, but before I let you go, maybe you could tease, are there a couple things that you're working on that really have caught your attention, or other places where you really want to dig deeper to understand this space more?
Yeah, there's so many. It's been so busy this year, as you're aware. But I think one thing that, as you know, I'm a very big drug pricing nerd, and a lot of the stories I write are very wonky and niche for Bloomberg Law. But recently, I've been digging deep into the draft guidance for the third cycle of the Medicare drug price negotiation program. What's interesting about that is, it's kind of Trump's first take and of the program, or his administration's first take of the program. He's also taking on a major cycle, because it's where we introduce Part B, renegotiations. He broke some new ground. When I say he, I really am talking about CMS. CMS broke some new ground on
it all funnels up.
Yeah, on fixed dose combination drugs in the guidance. So I think we're really watching for how this will unravel, because I think this program is like one of the biggest, things that the industry is watching for. And we'll know like by fall, this final guidance, what's in there and how Trump will take on this program. It's also going to be an interesting guidance, because if I'm correct, I've heard from drug makers who say they're anticipating, information in there that will talk about the Orphan Cures Act implementation and how they can move forward with that, which is, something we're watching for and writing about as well.
Yeah, I think we're so grateful how the quality of the coverage you provide on things like iPay. And you're right, it is a pivotal moment. We walk into Part B. Maybe I'll steal in another question of just saying, with Part B, physicians take their seat at the table to some extent. And full transparency, Incubate was opposed to this price control program. We also think even if there's going to be one, it's got flaws, the pill penalty. We're glad Orphan Cures is done. Do you think the dynamic changes at all a little bit, that the people being hurt by this program expand in 2028 to include physicians? Or do you not see that as a tremendous factor?
I think it's a big factor. I think a lot of I've really spoken with attorneys and groups about Part B, because I was really only writing about Part D first. So this was like a steep learning curve for me to understand, who are the players in Part B. But you're bringing in more stakeholders, you're bringing in new players in the drug supply chain. So I think the question is, how is CMS going to take that into consideration and get feedback from physicians and those who, are distributing these Part B drugs under the program? I think, if I'm correct, they plan on doing more listening sessions. So I think stakeholders are hoping that they can share their concerns, questions, comments in those listening sessions, but we'll only see how CMS will react to that through final guidance.
Yeah, well, really appreciate your thoughts. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So yeah. CMS is going to be doing that while also navigating $1 trillion out of Medicaid. And how's that going to impact hospitals and of course, Orphan Cures implementation. So it is so much to cover, but we are so grateful that you took time out of your busy schedule to join us for a Press Pass episode, and really grateful you could be here today.
It was great chatting with you, John. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for this Press Pass episode of the Making Medicine podcast. Reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on the world of policy and innovation. Follow us on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram using the links in the description of this video. And as always, keep innovating.